Ethiopia. Australia's Ethiopia warning. Abiy's wars threaten the region. The 15th of October 2025. Smart Traveller Map of Ethiopia. The map says it all. From the blood-red zones of Amhara and Benishangul Gumuz to the orange cautions stretching across Oromia and Somali regions, Australia's Smart Traveller Advisory paints Ethiopia not as a tourist destination, but as a country consumed by conflict, fear, and state decay. The message from Canberra is blunt. Reconsider your need to travel overall due to the risk of civil unrest and the threat of armed conflict. Entire regions are labeled, do not travel, Amhara, Tigray, Gambela, Benishangul Gumuz, and Northern Oromia. Even the nation's capital, Addis Ababa, home to the African Union's gleaming headquarters, now requires what the advisory calls a high degree of caution. It's a diplomatic way of saying what many have whispered for years: Ethiopia is at war with itself. Abiy Ahmed's prosperity in ruins. When Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed came to power in 2018, the world showered him with praise, a young reformer, a peace laureate, the face of a new Ethiopia. 7 years later, that image has collapsed under the weight of repression and war. The Amhara region, once the empire's core, has turned into a battlefield. Abiy's government calls it a law enforcement operation. Locals call it what it is, a war on his own people. Towns are bombed, civilians displaced, entire districts cut off by federal troops and militias. The same state that claimed to end ethnic division has institutionalized it, weaponized it, and exported it through endless propaganda. The Smart Traveller warning doesn't use political language, but its tone speaks volumes. It lists terrorism, kidnapping, and armed conflict not as possibilities but as ongoing realities. It warns that roads may close at any time, communication may be unreliable, and the security situation could deteriorate without warning. That's not travel advice, that's a clinical description of a failed state. The myth of reform. Abiy's slogans, prosperity, unity, green legacy, sound hollow against the backdrop of mass arrests, economic default, and ethnic cleansing allegations. His government now faces rebellions on nearly every front: Oromo insurgents in the south, Fano fighters in the north, and a restless population everywhere in between. Even Addis Ababa, the city that once symbolized Pan-African diplomacy, is under quiet siege. The Smart Traveller report lists petty crime, violent assaults, and bomb threats as normal risks. It warns foreigners to avoid walking at night and to be alert even in major hotels and markets. This is the capital of the African Union, yet foreign embassies issue evacuation plans while government propaganda insists Ethiopia is stable. The irony is darkly comic. The AU's Peace and Security Council meets in a city where peace and security no longer exist. The cost of denial. Abiy Ahmed's administration continues to blame extremists, foreign actors, and anti-peace forces for Ethiopia's disintegration, everyone but itself. But the Smart Traveller report reveals the truth: instability is not imported. It's homegrown. From Amhara to Oromia, the state's over-militarization has replaced governance with siege tactics. Federal troops enforce security, that breeds more insurgency. Villages become front lines. Borders become war zones. Australia's classification, Level 3, reconsider your need to travel, is the same warning it issues for countries like Iraq or Myanmar. Level 4, do not travel, covers nearly half of Ethiopia. This is not perception. This is data. The question is no longer whether Ethiopia is sliding toward collapse, but how far it will fall before the world admits it. Regional implications. The danger does not stop at Ethiopia's borders. Abiy Ahmed's government has become a regional destabilizer, stirring conflict in Somalia through unilateral port deals and border incursions, and reviving reckless rhetoric about access to the sea that threatens the sovereignty of Eritrea and the Red Sea's fragile balance. For regional stability, the lesson is stark: wars of ego and expansionism are luxuries no one can afford. The Smart Traveller map is not just a travel advisory, it's a warning flare for the region. Until Ethiopia ends its war on its own citizens and reclaims governance from propaganda, no amount of diplomatic gloss will change what the world now officially recognizes: a nation imploding from within. Call an aggressor by its name. The African Union, AU, the United Nations, UN, and all responsible member states bear not only a moral duty but also a binding legal obligation to reject and condemn Ethiopia's prosperity party expansionist rhetoric and its dangerous implications. Their publicly declared maritime ambitions, orchestrated media campaign and planned intentions to invade sovereign Eritrean territories cannot be considered a mere political discourse. It is a direct assault, not only against a sovereign country, but also on the international legal order, the Charter of the United Nations, and the foundational principles of the African Union that uphold the recognition of colonial borders and respect the sovereignty of member states. Failure to act or even silence in the face of such open threats amount to complicity. It will embolden those who entertain daydreams and believe borders can be redrawn by force. It will also further destabilize a region already burdened by instability. The international community must therefore speak with one clear voice. Call an aggressor by its name. Aggression, in any form or guise, should neither be tolerated nor have a place in the 21st century. Peace and stability among nations depend on principled, decisive, and collective rejection of unlawful expansionist territorial ambitions. It has been crystal clear that Eritrea's independence, its sovereignty and territorial integrity are non-negotiable. They were earned through immense sacrifice, united popular support and safeguarded by unshakable national unity and resolve of its people. Any attempt to undermine these principles would be a grave miscalculation. Eritrea possesses both the legitimate right and capability to defend its sovereignty. Firmly, lawfully, and decisively. Eritrea prevails. Embassy of Eritrea to the United States. The 16th of October 2025.
ምስክርነት አምባሳደር ላሪ ዊሊያምሰን መራሕቲ ኢትዮጵያ ንዘይሰምር ሕልሚ ከግህዱ ነታ ሃገርን ህዝባን ከቢድ ዋጋ ኣኽፈልዎም ኣብ ጥርዚ ፍሽለት ምስ በጽሑ ነብሶም ዝፈቱ ሓልየት ህዝቦም ዘይብሎም ምዃኖም ዘረድእ እዩ ምዚ ምስክርነት ብዝተተሓሓዘ ኢትዮጵያዊ ጸሓፊ ሎሬት ጸጋይ ገብረ መድህን ኣብታ ኢትዮጵያ ታሪክ ወይስ ተረት እትብል መጽሓፍ ናይ ንብዓት ቋንቋን ናይ ታሪክ ሸፈጥን ዝብል ኣርእስቲ ምዕራፍ ህዝቢ ኢትዮጵያ ካብ ነዊሕ እዋን ኣትሒዙ ካብ ስእነት እንጀራ ንላዕሊ ጥሜት ሓቂ ዘለዎ ህዝቢ ምዃኑ ይገልጽ ንሱ ካብ ሃፀይ ሃይለ ሥላሴ ጀሚርካ ክሳዕ መለስ ዜናዊ ዝነበሩ መራሕቲ እታ ሃገር ነታ ሃገር ዝሓልዩላን ንብዓት ዝዛርዩላን እናመሰሉ ንስልጣኖም እምበር ነቲ ህዝቢ ግዲ ከም ዘይነበሮም ይገልጽ ሃይለ ሥላሴ ምስ ተዓልወ ብዓጀብቲ ተሰኒዩ ናብ ማሕዩር እናተወስደ ኣንቲ ኢትዮጵያ ብሓቂ በዲልና ክዲና ብሓቂኸ ኣይደኸምናልክን ዲና ኢሉ ከም ዝበኸየላ ይነገር መንግስቱ እውን ኣብ መጨረሽታ ሰዓት ሰራዊቱ ክበታተን ምስ ተዓዘበ ኣብ እምኒ ተኾርሜ ገጸይ ብንብዓት ተሓጽበ ኢሉ ኣብታ ዝኽርታት ህይወት ዝሓዘት መጽሓፉ ኣስፊርዎ ኣሎ እቲ ሓቂ ንሱ እንተኾይኑ ማለት በቲ ውፅኢት ናይቲ ዘይሰምር ሕልሚ ተማሂሮም እንተኾይኖም ከምቲ ንጉስ ሰሎሞን ኣብ ሕልፈት ንዓለም ናይ ኮንትነት ኮንትያ ዝበለ ንዝመፁ መራሕቲ ግርም ኑዛዜን ኣስተምህሮም ክኾኖም ምኽኣለ ኢትዮጵያውያን መራሕቲ ግና ከም ንህቢ ምስ ነደፉን ምስ ተዘረሩን ጥራዩ ዝስቆሮም ኣምባሳደር ዴቪድ ኤ ኮርን ካብ ሰነ 1982 ክሳብ ሓምለ 1985 ኣምባሳደር ኣሜሪካ ኣብ ኢትዮጵያ ኮይኑ ዝሰርሐ ዲፕሎማት እዩ ኣብ 1990 ብቻርለስ ስቲዋርት ኬነዲ ቃለ መሕተት ተኻይዱሉ ነይሩ ኣብ ዘመነ ስልጣን ሮናልድ ሬገን ምስ ናይ ኤርትራን ትግራይን ተቃለሲ መድረኽ ርክብ ንምፍጣር ተደጋጋሚ ፈተነታት ነይሩ እዩ
In January 1941, the Allies launched a coordinated offensive across East Africa, striking the Italian forces from multiple fronts. A British Commonwealth army under General Sir Alan Cunningham advanced from Kenya into Italian Somaliland, while Major General Sir William Platt led divisions from Sudan into Eritrea, tightening the grip on Italian-controlled territories. Meanwhile, Wingate's Gideon Force, having left Khartoum in December, pushed through the mountainous terrain of Balaya toward Gojam, positioning themselves for decisive strikes against key Italian strongholds. Accompanying them was Emperor Haile Selassie. Rather than leading his forces on foot, the emperor strategically flew toward Ethiopia, escorted by 2 South African aircraft. With him was Ras Kassa, who had returned from Jerusalem with the heavy grief of losing 3 of his sons to the Italian occupation. Selassie's arrival was a rallying point for the Ethiopian patriots and tribal leaders who gathered to meet him in Balaya on February 6. By April 3rd, they reached the regional capital of Debre Marcos, a stronghold controlled by Ras Hailu. Meanwhile, in the north, General Platt had broken through the Italian defenses at Keren, Eritrea, after a brutal 2-month battle. This victory allowed British forces to capture Asmara, the Eritrean capital, on April 1st. Sensing the shift in the war's momentum, Ras Hailu surrendered to the British, liberating the entire region of Gojam from Italian control. Furthermore, General Cunningham's forces captured the city of Harar on the 27th of March and officially entered Addis Ababa on the 6th of April. But as the Ethiopian forces celebrated these victories, British leaders began to set plans of their own for a post-war Ethiopia. Anticipating the end of Italian control, the British established the Occupied Enemy Territory Administration to manage Ethiopia and the former Italian colonies of Eritrea and Somaliland. In a controversial move, they declared the Ethiopian province of Tigray to be part of Eritrea, overlooking Ethiopia's sovereignty. For Haile Selassie, these British maneuvers were deeply concerning. He had returned to Ethiopia to restore his nation's sovereignty, not to watch it reshaped by a new colonial force. Held under British orders in Debre Marcos for nearly 2 weeks, his patience wore thin. On April 22nd, General Cunningham issued a telegram to Major Wingate, explicitly instructing him to prevent Selassie's departure to Addis Ababa by all means short of force. However, Wingate, deeply committed to Ethiopian liberation and sympathetic to Selassie, defied Cunningham's orders and allowed the emperor to proceed. And so, with the support of Wingate and Sanford, Haile Selassie set off for Addis Ababa on April 27th, accompanied by his entourage, including Ras Kassa and the recently surrendered Ras Hailu. On May 5th, exactly 5 years after the city fell to the Italians, Emperor Haile Selassie returned to Addis Ababa in a grand parade. At the Menelik Palace, he raised the Ethiopian flag, and the roar of a 21-gun salute echoed through the city, signaling Ethiopia's return to self-rule. Back in London, there was much debate over how Ethiopia would be governed after its liberation. British Foreign Secretary Anthony Eden publicly affirmed Ethiopia's independence, but argued for a period of military guidance and control to support the nation's recovery. However, this control soon extended far beyond what was initially promised. The British took charge of almost every aspect of Ethiopian governance, from communication systems like radio, telegraph, and telephone services to the regulation of all imports and exports. The Ethiopian economy was tightly integrated into Britain's colonial territories, and the East African shilling replaced the Ethiopian currency. Additionally, Britain established a monopoly on commercial air transport. In return for these controls, Haile Selassie received significant financial aid from Britain. But despite this, the emperor became increasingly concerned about the erosion of Ethiopian sovereignty. Although he relied on British resources to stabilize the country, Selassie began secretly planning to regain full control. His growing frustration led him to consider expelling the British military mission altogether. However, British intelligence soon learned of his plans. Rather than face public expulsion, the British preemptively offered to withdraw their mission, claiming that Ethiopia had become self-sufficient enough to maintain its own military. With the British military gone, Selassie turned to the United States, seeking support to modernize and strengthen Ethiopia's armed forces. The US, already wary of British influence in the region, welcomed the opportunity. With American support, Selassie was able to establish a strong bureaucracy, staffed largely by officials who had remained loyal to him during his years in exile. During Ethiopia's prolonged struggle against the Italian occupation, a powerful new political force emerged. They were called the Patriots. These fighters, many of whom had risked their lives while the emperor was in exile, were deeply angered by Haile Selassie's decision to leave them behind during their battle for independence. When the emperor returned and began making alliances with those who had collaborated with the Italians, they grew distrustful and resentful. They felt their sacrifices had been overlooked and that they had been unjustly excluded from the new government. The most notable among these leaders was Bele Zeleki, a charismatic and well-respected freedom fighter. Bele had hoped his years of sacrifice would earn him a prominent role in the new government, but instead he was given a seemingly insignificant post as governor of the Bichena district in Gojam. Feeling snubbed and undervalued, Bele led an uprising against the emperor in February 1943. The emperor responded by sending an army to suppress the rebellion. Bele and his supporters retreated to the mountains, holding their ground for 3 months before they were ultimately defeated. Captured and brought to Addis Ababa, Bele was sentenced to life imprisonment. But despite his imprisonment, the zealous patriot continued to resist. He allied with a fellow inmate, Mamo Haile Mikhail, and together they escaped from prison, killing their guards in the process. However, they were soon recaptured in northern Ethiopia. This time, Haile Selassie made an example of them. On January 12, 1945, Bele, his brother, Mamo, and several other rebels were publicly executed in Addis Ababa. For many patriots and their supporters, Bele's death only cemented his legacy as a martyr. His memory, along with his rebellion, became a powerful symbol for future opposition movements against the emperor's rule. During Selassie's early years as regent, he faced constant challenges in consolidating his power, which left him wary of potential threats to his authority. His experiences led him to establish an elaborate security apparatus to protect his rule, with the imperial bodyguard becoming its cornerstone. This elite unit of the Ethiopian army, entrusted with safeguarding the emperor, was led by Brigadier Mulugeta Buli, a veteran of the Italian resistance who had returned to the country with the Gideon force. Under his command, the imperial bodyguard grew in strength and sophistication, securing both the emperor's safety and the stability of his regime. However, a turning point came in 1955 when Mulugeta Buli was replaced as head of the imperial bodyguard by Brigadier Mengistu Niwe, a young, idealistic officer driven by reformist ambitions. Mengistu was an emerging voice within the ranks, outspoken and increasingly frustrated by Selassie's authoritarian policies. While he initially carried out his duties, Mengistu's discontent grew as he watched the emperor's firm grip on power and his refusal to implement progressive reforms. By the late 1950s, his discontent with Selassie's regime had transformed into a quiet, festering rebellion. Secretly, he began laying the groundwork for a bold plot to challenge the emperor. Consequently, in 1960, Brigadier Mengistu Niwe would be at the center of a bloody coup that would shake the foundations of the empire to its core.
The last 500 years. In the last 500 years, Ethiopia had access to international waters only for 40 years. When Eritrea was joined to Ethiopia in a federation. That's when Ethiopia gained access. Of course, Ethiopia always aspired to have access. But it was the Turks, the Ottoman Turks that had it. It was the Italians that had it. But Ethiopia did not have access to. But the fact that Ethiopia, since medieval times, that Ethiopian leaders wanted access to the sea is not to be denied, but it's only in the last 40 years that, in the 40 years between 1950 and 1990, that Ethiopia had Assab and Assawa as its own sovereign port. So Eritrea joined Ethiopia in a federation, and Ethiopia gained access to the sea. Eritrea won the war, obliterated the Ethiopian army in Eritrea, and chose independence in a legal way. Held a referendum, and it became a member of the United Nations, and Eritrea is another country right now. You can wail about it, you can decry it, you can talk about it, you can whine about it. It doesn't matter. Eritrea is a sovereign country. Eritrea is a sovereign country. If Ethiopians did not know this, let me make that clear, that Eritrea is a sovereign country. How are you going to get it? How are you going to take Assad away? By accusing?
It's a በጣም ትልቅ ሀገር ነች። በኢትዮጵያ ፖለቲካ ውስጥ ደግሞ እኔ ብዙ ጊዜ ተናግሬያለሁ። አሁን ብናገረው ደስ ይለኛል። ትልቅ ኢምፓክት ያላት ሀገር ነች። እና 5 እና 6 መሪዎች እድሜ መቀጠልና ማጠር ላይ የኤርትራ እጅ አለበት።
እዚያ ካርታ ኢትዮጵያ ኤርትራ የላን። ስለዚህ ኤርትራ አካል ኢትዮጵያ አይነበረትን ኮይናውን አይትፈልጥን። እዙውንቲ ንኢትዮጵያ ዝመርሕ ዝነበረ ሃፀይ እዚ ድማ ኦፊስ እዩ። ኣብ ኦፊሱ ተሰቂላ ዘላ ስእሊ ግና ኣስተብሉ ኤርትራ የላን። ስለዚህ ኤርትራ ምድራን ባሕራን አካል ኢትዮጵያ ኮይኑ ይፈልጥን እሞ አንቱም ዝተገንጠለትሉ ትብሉ አንቱም የተገነጠለችበት ትብሉ ዝተመልሰትሉ ኢልኩም አርሞ ንምባል ዝኣክል
ኮሎናይዜሽን የሀገር ዘትሕዝተልካስ ኤርትራ ኮሎናይዝድ ዓዲያ ትበሃይለ ስላሴ ተገብረ ምጭራር ገርመለ ከም ክስታይ ተሓስወተልኻ ሸፈጥ ኤርትራ ብስሪያ ተቃሊሳ ነዞም ናይ ኢትዮጵያ መስፋሕፋሕቲ አፍንጮም ሴራያ ናጽነት ሐዝ
ሽድሽተ ተማሃሮ ኣብ ዓሰብ ናብ ታሪኻዊ ድፍዓት በፂሖም ትብል ዜና ድማ ነይራ። ኣቐድማ ኣቢሉ ሰራዊት ኣብ ዓሰብ ኤግዛም እናገበሩ ዘርኢ ስእሊ እውን ነይሩ። ስፖርታዊ ንጥፈታት ዘርኢ መደባቱን ቀፂሉ እዚ ክንርኢ ፀኒሕና ሕጂ ድማ እቲ ብዓሰብ ኣተወ ክበሃሉ ዝቐነየ ናይ ብልጽግና በዓል ድሮን ሰራዊት ኣየስተብሃለሎም እንዶ ይነገሩ ብሕፅር ዝበለ መሬት ኣማኒ ዘሎ በዚ ዝጻባእ ሰብ ስትረፍ ዝጻባእ ሃመማ የለን ይትመልእኽ ተወድሓ ቦይ ብወገን ዓሰብ ኣብ ሳምረ ንተዋስኦ ንምርኢት ተባሂሉ ካብ ዝተፈላለየ መኣዝን ክጓረዝ ዝቐነየ ሰራዊት ድማ በብዝመፆ ክብተን ጀሚሩ ምህላው ሰሚዕኩም ትኾኑ ወላተን ናይ ተዋስኦ መድረኻቱ ፈሪሰን ኣለዋ ጉዲ ዘይዘበኑ ዝመፀቶ ኮተቴ ነዛ ኩላ ጌቼ ኣሉ ኩልኪሉ ዝኣከባ በላዒት ውዳቕ ምድሪ ዓፈር ብዘይጢት ቤርሙዳ ይቕየሮም ምህላው ዝእንፍት ዜና እዩ ንወዲ በሻሻ ዕምርኻ ዕምረ ሃመማ ክገብራ ኢሳያስ ኢሎሞ ግዲ ኮይኖም እነሆ ከምታ ናይ ሶማሊላንድ ሰተት ኢሉ ማርሽ እንዴትሮ ዝውር ጀሚሩሎ ኩናት የለን ኢለ ነይረ ኩናት የለን ጥራይ ዘይኮነ ወላ ራዕዲ የለን ስግኣት ዝመስል ጉዳይ ኣለሞ ከመይ ንእትብሉ እንሆ ወዲ በሻሻ ከምቲ ኣወል ዝበሎ ጥራይ ዘየተወላ እምበር ኢልዋ
ኢትዮጵያ ለቀይ ባህር ስትል ኤርትራን የመውረር ፍላጎት የላት።
ኣናብስ ደቂ ትግራይ ውፅእ እብሉለው ወይዘሮ መድህን መቸም ንገሊኦም ኳ ክትፍሕንጭሮም ቁሩብ ዝተርፋ እዚ ድማ ረኣይዎ
ግን ዓብይ ስርዓት ናይ ኤርትራ ስርዓት ናይ ምቕያር ዓቕሚ የብሉ ኣሜሪካውያን ኣለዎም ምዕራባውያን ኣለዎም ይፍለጥ እዩ ኢሳያስ ግን ከምኡ ክኾን ድዩ ኣይኮንን አይ ዶንት ቲንክ ሶ ቢኮዝ ምስ ስዑዲ ዘለዎ ርክብ ምስ ግብፂ ዘለዎ ርክብ ምስ ራሽያ ዘለዎ ርክብ ምስ ቻይና ከይድ ከለኹ እቲ ዝነበረ ቃብላ ገለሪ ዘሎ ርክብ ስኡልካ ቀሊል ነገር ኣይኮነን ኢሳያስ ማለት ተፈትዎ ተፀልአ ማለት እዩ ኣብ ዓለምና ካብ ዘለዎ ዓበይቲ ፖለቲከኛታት ተሓደ ሰብ እዩ ኣርባዕተ ዓበይቲ ፖለቲከኛታት ኣለዉ ኢለ ኣነ ዝኣምን ኣብ ዓለም ኣርባዕተ ዓበይቲ ፖለቲከኛታት ኣለዉ ኢለ ዝኣምን ኣነ ካብኦም ተሓደ
ኢሳያስ ትብል ሽም ሰድመፀ ልባን ተትዕቀን መጅሙዕ ትዘብጥ መሃለወት ሕጂ ኣነ እውን ሽኮርያ ክውስኸላ ምእንቲ ሓዲስ ዜና ክነግረኩም ምስ ስታሊን ገብረ ስላሴ ክንሰርሕ ኢና ወረን ኣስመራ ክዕድሞ መደብ ኣለኒ ስታሊን ንትግራይ ኣብ ፀገማ ስጋብሎም ዝመከተ ንፉዕ ጋዜጠኛ እዩ ዘለና ፍልልይ ዝኾነ ይኹን በዓል ውዕለት ትግራይ ሃይለ ደደቢት እውን እቲ ገለገለ ዝተጋነነ ብልዕሊ ኤርትራ ዘለዎ መረዳእታ ገዲፍካ ኣብ ልዕሊ ሃገሩ ዘለዎ መትከል ዝፅላእ ኣይኮነን ኣነ ነጊረኩም እየ መትከል የደንቀ እንተወሓደ ሃይለ ጥራዩ ትግራይ ትዕወት ትብል ጭርሖ ዝጥቀመላ ዘሎ
ዓይነ ሓሳባት ከይህልዎ ዝማይ ዓይነ ንስርሎ ዝሕሉ ካብ ሰማይ
ይስራሓሉ ስለ ዘሎ ኣብ ፉልፉል ማይ ኣብ ድሳዕረረ ሳዕሪ ኣብ ድበልፀገት ሃገር ይህነፅ ስለ ዘሎ እቲ ብድሕሪ ሕጂ ድውለድ ማፀን ንሱ ክርከባ مش لازم حج زلوا نولد ولد يا إرترا دميا نمان ما يكون أي دميت نويانا يدميت ندحر حرتي دميت نا أمريكا يدميت نا أنا إرترا ويانا دميا إذا كن فلت لنا حادنتنا صنع الله كان سنبدي بلنا رعد حزننا يقولون never kneel down إرترا تبهيل never أنا أبجد جدا كندا سريحي نصف نفاس تنفاس ناتنا ترى إرترا دخنت كوتشونتي عشان تأخذ عتابله عشان متقفوا عتابله أفو عتشوف عتابله ملعب أرجفة بله جبات أرجفة بله عياس أرجفة بله عدنا كو هافتاميا إزاي شوكون هاي لسلاسي مسرقة شو عطا عمت عم بتقبلينا شو عطا عمت مرعت كلتا عمت نيرانا شو عطا عمت عم بتقام سبلعنا إذن بعد مد تصدق كبعد مد تسوق حجي شو نبراتو قريفو قصو قريفو تصدق نمعات تصديدو دفلت يزبي أفرق معجي مريو تحاريسو كوعيتون دفاريسو بابو فيسو زبلع زنبر هزبي جانو هاي مساعته ونا شو عطا عمت عم بتقبلنا كبت دبلع مساعند طريد دبلع مساعند هزبي دسرحو مساعند دحارسو مساعند ما تصديدن بعد ما كاب بعد ما تمالي بدحر مقارجة أمريكا زولع لنا مبرويانا دي ولعوا أمريكا زولع لنا نربحوا عالم كأن ربح ألين زبوا يعدلون نحن قلنا ربح حزبنا منقستنا ونوع مرقات أصل زلوا الجوجو أسبسيبو بريزيدنت إساياس نفسي بريزيدنت خيكونا كل تجارلا يكل عاتيو تزارون نحن كنا تنت همسينا الجيجنا سبسينا ويسرنا سيلنا خوف كنا بلا يكونا كم تننا تنت دمسانا دمينا خا كن هانساينا زولو ساعات لبس ني أوروبا مجمرة خلص زي تنقرتي كن رسوح بنا نحن خورينا أنا نقبلنا نزوان حنت أبيت خيبته إذا أمر عسد شو ما تعمل تما أبرد سينا خابز زنبي وقمشلا هو زنبي يوم حجي نايت أولا لا مو فيشلني أبيت بخرب كلنا أركلنا
عصر كوخو كوخو باي ما أذاناي نتزحالف عصر سياماي عصر كوخو كور وارد سماي تسنم سنسلت لسخامل عصر كوخب كوخب صباحها ساعات لا محبين من سيقوي أصدق قدام ساعات نسق خيبته
شير لايك سبسكرايب مقبار يترسعوا. Thank you.